Hello, this is Mr. Galley from GCSE English Revision Pod with a quick message for you. If you want even more English Revision Pod in your ears, you can now subscribe to our premium service, GCSE English Revision Pod Plus, where for the price of just over £2 a month, on top of all the amazing free episodes which will continue to be free and there for you to use, you can also get a selection of amazing bonus episodes on things like Macbeth, A Christmas Carol, Romeo and Juliet, and all your favourite topics covered in the depth and detail that you are used to. If you are interested in getting even more GCSE English Revision Pod, all you've got to do is click the link at the top of this episode description where you can subscribe to GCSE English Revision Pod Plus. Hello and welcome to GCSE English Revision Pod, your one-stop shop for all things GCSE English Revision. You are here. You have arrived at the one place that you need to be at this moment in time. If you are focusing on writing comparative poetry essays in the summer's upcoming GCSE exams.
And you're doing Worlds and Lives. It's not very helpful if you're doing Parent Conflict, though we do have Parent Conflict episodes.
We do. If you are doing that anthology, it would be a far better use of your time to go and find those episodes further down our feed on Power and Conflict. If you are not doing GCSEs at all, then we're very appreciative of the download. But this is probably
we did get an email from someone a couple of months ago who was saying like she was in the sixth form and she's listening to them for nostalgia from like 6 months ago. I love the idea that you can have nostalgia for like 6 months in the past when you're revising your GCSEs. But that is you. Please, we're not offended by that. We love it. We love and value all of our listeners.
And nostalgia is not what it used to be anyway. So today we are well, there's some stuff we should tell you if you are new to GCSE English Revision Pod. Every episode we walk you through a hypothetical GCSE question. We look at the set texts and talk about how we would construct an essay response to that question.
It's an argument, isn't it? It's not just giving you info.
Exactly. We like to, rather than just this is what you need to know, we say this is the thesis. Every year when the examiner's report comes out, I know you, like me, Mr. Forster, you wait with bated breath for the release of the examiner's report that comes out in this sort of autumn, saying what students did well in the previous exam series, what they didn't do so well. And every single year they make some comment to the point of where students were able to actually construct an argument, they inevitably did better, even if their language analysis was not necessarily as strong. Those students who had an argument, a thesis, an idea about the text that they are writing about invariably do better than the students who don't.
Yeah, it's get punchy. Like there's so much stuff out there that's just analysis without thinking about arguments and comparison. So that's why you're here, isn't it? That's why you're listening. So download the handout. If you haven't done so already, click on the link. It's on Spotify. It's at the bottom, or whichever podcast app you're using. Great thing that we always say is download the handout. Look at the question. Why not plan what you'd say before listening to what we're going to bang on about, and then you can listen and see what did we say. Is there anything that you'd add in that we noticed that maybe you didn't?
Fantastic. So, without further ado, why don't you take us to the question?
So the question is, compare how the connection between family and identity is presented in A Portable Paradise and one other poem from the Worlds and Lives anthology. And I've chosen Homing, which I think is an excellent poem. A brief note on Roger Robinson, the Portable Paradise poet. He came to Bristol, I was just saying before we started recording, came to Bristol a couple of years ago. He's a fantastic poet. And that the collection, which is called, this is the title poem in his collection, A Portable Paradise, is utterly superb. There's a breathtaking poem about interaction he had between his nurse in the hospital with his newborn, and it's really moving. Great stuff on Grenfell. Would thoroughly recommend checking him out because he's a brilliant poet, and it could be great revision for your unseen too. So should we get straight into our thesis? So we always start our essays with a thesis. Why do we call it a thesis, Mr. Galley?
Because we're trying to move beyond the simple idea of an introduction. There's nothing wrong with saying introduction in one sense, but introduction perhaps
functionally.
Yeah, it functions as an introduction, but it contains an argument, right? It contains a mapping out a signpost. I would say to my students, it's like the anchor. You're throwing the anchor over the side of the ship that will hold your essay as the storm of the exam blows over. Your thesis statement will serve like your anchor, holding the good ship essay against the ravages of the storm.
Mr. Galley. No wonder your students so admire you. Okay. All my metaphors today at school were all about food because I was really hungry all day. So I kept on talking about like special sauces and like the chicken and your filling. And then like students started to notice by about period 3 and they were like, "Are you just really hungry, sir?" I was like, "Sure am." Anyway, let's read.
Context is everything. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Both Roger Robinson's A Portable Paradise and Homing by Liz Berry are seemingly autobiographical poems, presenting familial roots as being central to the formation and preservation of identity. Written after his grandmother's death, Berry's elegiac poem mourns her grandmother's apparent ambivalence towards her black country roots, with the speaker wanting to take on her accent and dialect to celebrate an identity which societal expectations suppress. By contrast, Robinson's poem is a more straightforwardly positive celebration of his grandmother's legacy and, by extension, his own Trinidadian diasporic identity. There's a couple of words.
What we always talk about. Yeah, sorry, define the vocabulary first, and then I'll talk about words in the thesis statement.
All the vocabulary's on the sheet, so do kind of go and check that out because we love a word. I love words as well, English teacher. But there are a couple on there that you might not have come across. So the first one is elegiac. So it's like an elegy, a marked by mourning, reflection, sorrow, grief, loss. So that's
elegy is what is written often in the newspaper about someone who's died, or the speech given at a funeral.
Yeah. So it's an elegiac poem. It's kind of mourning. Ambivalence is a great word. It's one of our buzzword bingo words. Having mixed feelings about something. And then the last one, diasporic identity, which is one that's very useful in this context. So a diaspora refers to a people or a group of people who have dispersed from their original homeland, often carrying cultural, social, or political connections to their place of origin, whilst also forming new connections with the place in which they live. So Robinson, having lived in Trinidad, having Trinidadian roots, would class himself as part of the Trinidadian diaspora, even though, of course, he's a British poet. You can have both.
So why the thesis is effective in this case? You've done a nice thing similar to our other episode on Worlds and Lives that where we've talked about this, which is you've gone into the similarities between them, but also that kind of that sort of subtle difference as well, that they both do. They both have a celebration of a grandparent's identity. However, one of them comes with a much more complex feeling than the other. One has that straightforward celebration. So if you're always getting the kind of the comparative point, but also the complexities within that comparison in there, you've put yourself on a really good path, essentially.
Yeah, and we've also going to put a few signposts and handholds out for the examiner. We've talked about kind of what the poems are actually about. This the mourning of a grandmother, her black country roots, her accent and dialect that are so central to the poem. So we've set up quite a few things that we're going to then explore in the essay. So let's look at our first section. So we've always arbitrarily, you don't have to write 3 main paragraphs in an essay, but we found in our experience that typically this is the amount that most students can come to write once they've done a bit of revision and a bit of work. So it doesn't mean that, when you get to A level, those of you who are going to be carrying on, it doesn't mean all essays have to be 3 paragraphs long. But it's a structure that we've used for the podcast, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think just because of the time constraints you're under, the Venn diagram of the quality of writing versus the quantity for most people, I think, lands around the 3 big idea mark.
So let's look at the first of our big ideas. Both Robinson and Berry use a central conceit to explore how familial roots shape our identity, with Robinson portraying his grandmother's conception of paradise as a tangible inheritance he can carry with him, while Berry presents language as a boxed, hidden legacy that must be unlocked and reclaimed to connect with familial roots.
Which is essentially a posh way of saying that both poems have an image at the centre of them, right? Both of them have, as most poems do, right? Almost all the poems in the anthology And they love this with the unseen as well, don't they? Almost every unseen that certainly AQA have given since this exam paper appeared in 2015, the poems almost always have one central extended metaphor or conceit at the heart of them. So this is
Not
always a
always,
good
but
thing to be looking out for.
and often, I mean, that's one of the reasons, one of the things that we love about poetry is the use of metaphor and imagery. And often it's a very safe place to start with an unseen or an anthology poem. So let's get straight into this. Let's look at the conceit that's central to Homing, the speaker's grandmother having a box beneath the bed in which they kept their accent. So, I mean, we should start by looking at this figurative idea of the lock that's rusted shut by hours of elocution and the teacher's ruler across her legs, and the box being beneath the bed. I mean, conversations are rusted, first of all.
Yeah, it's a clever idea, that, isn't it? Because rust, the poet's almost playing with something. It sounds like that's happened actively. You know, it almost sounds like rusted shut is something that's been done. But of course, rusting is something that happens through lack of use. But then the poet combines that with the active thing that did happen, which of course was the elocution lessons and the teacher's violence towards them. So you get that nice mix of the sort of passive consequence of this really awful active discrimination against the accent.
Yeah, and I think, and also the idea that it's rooted in childhood, it's rooted in a trauma that is a long time ago for her grandmother, because obviously the poem itself is exploring this moment when we presume the grandmother has now died, and it's exploring her legacy, and part of her legacy is this rusted shut accent that's being kind of suppressed by the violence towards kind of her expression of her cultural roots. I mean, the second person is interesting as well, isn't it? And the past tense rather than the present continuous. Because it's interesting that the conceit is rooted in the literal act of clearing out the grandmother's house, as if the grandmother's accent and dialect were part of her inheritance. But it's also it's got this personal touch, hasn't it? There's something, it's a poem written to the grandmother, and we are somehow as readers hearing it, listening in. There's something interesting, I think, in that relationship between the speaker and the reader when it isn't written to us. It has a very clear interlocutor in mind, although that interlocutor presumably is now dead and gone.
Do you think there's an element of that which is highlighting the fact that it's too late to speak to the person who the poet would ultimately like to say this to, and therefore we as the audience are the only audience that the poet can have as part of the kind of tragedy of the piece?
Yeah, and I mean, let's look at how this conceit is extended as the poem goes on, because that absolutely comes through towards the end, doesn't it? So in the final stanza, um, with the idea the grandmother's words that were locked in the box were like pigeons that, when released, would be sent fluttering for home. So it's interesting the way in which that kind of that imagery shifts, and we get this image of birds, of homing pigeons, and of course the title of the poem is Homing. That is at the root of the extended metaphor, that what's boxed up here are words that are like homing pigeons that will return to the roots. It suggests, doesn't it, that there's something intensely natural, something that the Black Country accent and dialect and its influence on her family is something that is bursting to come out and return, despite the kind of the violence that perhaps kept it boxed up and hidden beneath the bed in the first place. So it's a really wonderful metaphor, isn't it, to encapsulate the way in which her grandmother responded to the prejudices against her kind of cultural identity.
It's nice because it's quite a timeless image as well, isn't it? Pigeons, homing pigeons, have been used for hundreds of years and are still, well, maybe more, I don't know, and they're still race now. I remember where I grew up, they used to start the homing pigeon races there. These big lorries full of pigeons would come down and release them all. And there was always just a few that wouldn't do it. They'd just wander around, and you think, oh, poor thing. It's now hundreds of miles away from where it is.
Pigeon.
Yeah. So not all of them. Well, whether the poet knew these few that don't make it, that get stuck in southwest Cornwall. Okay. But yeah, it's a really beautiful idea, that one, isn't it?
And there's an obvious comparison here, because compare this with the conceit in Ronson's poem. This kind of seemingly oxymoronic idea set up in the title itself, that paradise is something portable, you can carry it always concealed. It's a very similar metaphor, actually, that a crucial part of the identity of the speaker and their family is caught up in a box, is portable, is there. But
Mm,
unlike the quite negative imagery around Berry's the box in the grandmother's house, for Robinson, this is far more positive straight away. I mean, he starts off by playing with the expected connotations of paradise. There's white sands, there's green hills, there's fresh fish,
mm.
which is evocative of his Trinidadian roots, where he lived with his parents for 15 years. But it also becomes clear that, like Berry's grandmother's box, this is not a tangible thing. This is a metaphysical, an abstract idea that's shaped by family memories, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that you've played that a box can be both something that something that keeps something safe, and also something that can keep something almost prisoner. It's it's nice when you can get into the kind of the advanced subtleties of how a single image across, how two writers can use a similar image in very subtly different ways. I think that's nice. Does that
and the
lead
other,
us then on to the middle third
well,
of the essay?
perhaps one final very small point just before we do, which is the other crucial difference is the way in which the the grandmother in Robinson's poem actively passes on this wisdom. We even hear her voice in the poem in a way that we don't in Homing. Homing this wisdom is reconstructed. This identity is not passed on. It's hidden away. It's locked away in a way that
Mm,
actually the advice given to the speaker in the Portable Paradise it's given freely. So there is a crucial difference there. I
very
mean,
nice.
let's carry on. So in this way, both poems engage with the ways memory and language link us to our forebears, preserving their legacies and voices even after they are gone. So I think, straight away, Portable Paradise, Robinson connects the idea of paradise with his family. He says, and if I speak of paradise, then I'm speaking of my grandmother. I mean, even starting with that coordinating conjunction, and we're kind of brought in medias res into the middle of things, aren't we? As if we're
Mm,
speaking to the poet, and then the whole poem is this single three verse stanza, um, in which the words of his grandmother through free and direct discourse kind of blend with his own. So, the caesuras and enjambment that mirror the rhythms of everyday speech. Everything about it feels like there's an intimacy between Robinson and his grandmother that we are kind of getting to witness, and it's quite lovely in the
mm,
poem. I mean, I quite like the imperatives that run through there as well. Trace, find, shine. Like there's such a positive. Trace its ridges in your pocket. Um, find a lamp. Um, shine the lamp on it like a fresh hope. The imagery contained in those imperatives is unambiguously positive. It's imagery of connection, imagery of hope, um,
mm,
and the grandmother's wisdom. Paradise can be concealed. There is perhaps a fragility there that's comparable with berries. Sometimes perhaps it must be concealed because it could be stolen. But at the same time, there's there's a beauty to it. And if we see, this is where you can use if clauses. I love an if clause in an essay. If we
mm,
see the paradise here as a symbol of Robinson's Trinidadian roots, of some kind of cultural legacy passed on by his grandmother, then it's easy to see how this is quite a positive metaphor for his relationship with the diasporic identity. It's something that,
mm.
whilst it may at times be hidden, perhaps in response to prejudice or more negative encounters, it's something that's always portable, carried with him, that he can find when needed, that preserves his grandmother's his legacy and his links with his family and his familial identity.
And there's
And
that
that's a
nice
kind
rule
of
of three in there that sort of suggests that enduring power of it to be supportive in almost any situation. I like that bit, that empty room, be it hotel, hostel, or hovel.
yeah,
Through the repetition of that alliterative H sound, you've got the hotel, which has connotations of perhaps luxury,
yeah,
pleasant
hostel,
place to be.
Capri,
Then you've got the hostel, where things are becoming a little bit more grimy, perhaps a little bit cheaper. Then you got hovel, which suggests kind of perhaps not a particularly nice place to be. So, but within the sort of degenerating quality of that room, the 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 sort of metaphysical nature of paradise that you suggest maintains its power, whatever the external factors affecting you.
so it's such a positive image, isn't it? So It's an image that's the antithesis, perhaps, of whilst we could compare Berry's celebration of her grandmother and the vernacular, the speech, the language and identity of the West Midlands
Mm.
in her lyric poetry, but there is it's always tinged with ambivalence in Berry's poem. I mean, let's look at Berry's poem, I think, just because I'm looking at the time here. We are running on a bit today.
Yes,
Um,
sorry.
so so, the first thing we might want to look at is the way in which Berry describes herself as the entire collection called Black Country that this poem is taken from is rooted in romantic poetry, specifically the poetry of Wordsworth, who in his preface to Lyrical Ballads, his most famous collection, describes how what he tried to do was preserve common life in language really used by men.
Mm.
Berry does this, but with women. She extends, she challenges this kind of um, the monolithic idea of male poetry here. But what's
Mm.
quite interesting then is the way in which she then reproduces the language of her grandmother. So if we note in terms of the graphology of the poem that the words associated with standard English and received pronunciation, how now brown cow, are italicized, and they're carefully balanced in the third stanza by three Black Country dialect words, bibble, fettle, fay, wum,
Mm.
words that mean pebble, food, um, tea, sorry, not fay, tay. Um, uh, so what you kind of got there in that kind of careful balance is this challenge to this hierarchical view of language in which standard English and received pronunciation have some kind of power, because these words seem to spill out from the metaphorical box when the speaker jemmied it open. So there's something here
Mm.
about the idea that the words of Black Country dialect are trying to spill out, just as in A Portable Paradise. Robinson's grandmother's the paradise she talks of is always there, something to be found in hovel, as you said, hostel or in hotel. There is this kind of positivity here that these words are spilling out of this figurative box. Um,
Mm.
and also, I think the metaphors to describe the accent itself, I think, are quite lovely. They're rooted in the Industrial Revolution, the imagery of the Industrial Revolution, which obviously so
Mm.
shaped the language of the West Midlands. So vowels are ferrous as nails, consonants you could lick coal from. And she wants the pits, railways, factories thinking and clanging the night shift. I mean, I love the onomatopoeia there and that kind of imagery, the idea that actually um, the world of her grandmother here is not simply about her accent and dialect, is it? It's evoking actually a vision or a vision of the West Midlands past, of an industrial
Mm.
past that has perhaps been lost along with her grandmother. So there's a kind of beauty here that is actually comparable with Robinson. So I guess in terms of finishing that paragraph, the first paragraph was saying actually they're quite different. One's quite positive, one's quite negative. Here, actually, we are finding some beauty in Berry's poem, that in her depiction of that kind of familial relationship, that's certainly comparable with Robinson's, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I
And that leads us
completely agree.
to our last point, I think, and then we'll finish off for today. So, yeah, although Robinson and Berry both explore how language and tradition connect family and self, for Robinson, this relationship is unambiguously positive and also seemingly easy, whilst Berry highlights the need for her to actively reconstruct her grandmother's legacy. So, Robinson's poem, as we said, acknowledges the challenges the speaker may face in life, that reference to the hovel, also with the idea of being put under pressure with stresses that
Mm.
might even be sustained and daily. It's not a poem that's naive. It's aware. The grandma's message is one of resilience and transcendence in the face of difficulties. Um, but if we look more closely at the end of the poem, I love the ending to this poem. She advises her grandsons to empty the paradise onto a desk, shine a lamp on it like the fresh hope of morning, and keep staring at it till you sleep. So the light imagery here, I mean, there's the motif of light throughout the whole poem, but the light imagery here suggests hope. But there's
Mm.
also, I think, something meta-poetic going on. So meta-poetry is poetry about poetry. Because, of course, for a poet, writing about emptying details onto a desk lit by lamplight, this is
Mm.
about writing, isn't it? Should we therefore see his grandmother's legacy as being comparable to what Berry wants to inherit in Homing? Is it actually about inheriting words, about
Mm.
Robinson's identity as a poet, as a writer? Is the portable paradise really the words he carries around in his head to empty onto a desk, to put into a collection of poetry, to share ultimately? his diasporic roots, his familial roots with us.
And
And that
until
might
you
link
fall asleep is quite nice, isn't it? Because it kind of suggests
beautiful.
that
That's when
feeling
I
of
research
like
it. That's
release,
when I
and
research it.
that he's it brings him a sort of sense of a great sense of achievement or completion, and that the releasing those words onto paper brings that deep peace to
Yeah.
the process.
I think anyone who's done any writing, I think, will absolutely recognise that there is something deeply cathartic, deeply pleasurable about creative processes that I think certainly the ending to the poem seems to be suggesting. So if we compare this with homing, then the poem ends with the anaphora that emphasises the speaker's yearning for connection. I wanted that box. I wanted to swallow them all. I wanted to forge your voice. I mean, and that metaphor, forge your voice in my mouth, a blacksmith's furnace. I mean, it's such an interesting metaphor to describe the taking on her grandmother's accent and dialect, isn't it?
Mm.
It's Forge is active, but it's rooted in that kind of industrial landscape. It's not soft. It sounds difficult. It sounds hard. It's a recognition, isn't it, that her relationship with her grandmother's identity is something that requires vigorous action, requires the heat
Mm.
of a furnace, requires transformation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of mirrored, isn't it, in that kind of alliteration, the forge, furnace, um, the the sound patterns that kind of and the assonance that bind this whole forge, your voice, mouth,
Mm.
long vowel sounds that bind the image together. Um, and it's similar, isn't it? I think maybe to the end of Robinson's poem, that actually, in both cases, actually, um, there's an image, isn't there, of a speaker working to create something out of their familial roots, out of the legacy that's been left them. Um,
Mm.
although it is perhaps different in the sense that um, for Robinson, this seems easy and pleasurable, even sends him to sleep, whereas for Berry, this language remains something that's clearly kind of a challenge, reconstructing that Black Country accent and dialect that her
And
grandmother.
perhaps there's a hint of guilt in that one
Yeah,
that there, of course, isn't in the first one. That this is, like you say, the implication is that this is being done too late, isn't it? That this is done in memory of someone after this person's gone, and perhaps that builds into the metaphor of that they are now willing to do this hard work, this forging of the language. The willingness to do it perhaps comes from the guilt that they perhaps didn't do this enough when the grandparent was still alive.
definitely. But the Afro does that, doesn't it? It's that plaintive that
Mm.
if you repeat something enough, there's a sense that you're repeating it because you can't quite get what you want. So, conclusion.
Yeah.
What are the poems ultimately exploring? Are they similar or different? Their messages about family and identity. I think ultimately they are quite similar, but I think often the best conclusions will focus on perhaps a broad similarity, but you'll always unpick those subtle differences because they'll never be exactly the same. So you can certainly
No.
talk about how both do find a kind of beauty and positivity in their kind of respective familial roots and the identity they've inherited from their grandparents. But there is this kind of bittersweet tinge to Berry's poem that perhaps isn't really there in Robinson's, which is as I said, I think just a beautiful poem about this relationship and the legacy left to him by his grandmother. This
Yeah.
paradise that perhaps even is to do with writing itself.
Fantastic. So we have rambled on for a bit longer than we normally do, but they were two fantastic poems. So why not talk about them a little bit more? If
And it's late.
if you
We're tired.
It's late, we're tired, we can't always deliver
Can't always be top
concise
top
white hot
bananas, as they.
analysis. If you would like to get in contact with us, you can of course drop us an email at englishrevisionpod@gmail.com. You can give us a follow on Instagram. What are we called on
Don't go on it.
Instagram?
Top tip. Something to do with English
Now,
Revision Pod. You'll
something
find
to
it.
do
It'll
with
be
English
in the
Revision
description.
Pod.
In the description.
Yeah,
All
it's that's true.
there.
You can just click on the description in this
And if you found it useful and want another episode, we have lots. We do have our kind of premium stuff. You've heard the adverts. We're banging about that now. But there is more stuff out there. It helps keep us recording. So do support us if you can.
It keeps it keeps the podcast engine keeps on rolling.
We really
I
stopped the
don't
problem.
know.
Nearly 30 minutes.
That's it.
Thank you, everyone. It's been lovely listening. Lovely listening. We've not been listening. We've been
It's
talking.
been lovely listening to me.
I've really
I
enjoyed it.
reckon
Had a lovely
that's
time.
genuinely what you think while you're teaching your class, isn't it? You think, oh, this is lovely. These guys are
You
so
must be having a
lucky to
lovely
be
time listening
listening to me talk right now.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks
Enjoy.
for
Have a
coming.
nice evening or whatever you're listening, and we will see you next time.